Come on down.
All right, here we are, episode 17 of the High Octane Dads podcast. Last few episodes, we've had some guests on with us, which has been pretty awesome. Definitely been enjoying having some other folks in here and getting their opinions on things, and looking forward to doing a lot more of that. We've been using the Riverside FM app, which is, I think, I don't know if it's owned by Spotify or just like an affiliate somehow, but it all
Yeah, I'm
ties
not
into the
sure.
Spotify per podcaster stuff. But yeah, it's been great. It makes the logistics of getting a guest on a lot easier. So if you've been wanting to be a guest but don't know how it's going to work out, I mean, literally, an app in your phone so far has worked. Quality wise, we've gotten some good feedback, I think. But if anybody's got any feedback on the quality of the guests and things, we definitely want to hear that. Be sure to comment on it, or go to our Facebook page and shoot us a message. Is probably the best way to get ahead of or get in touch with us. Um, Chris, I think you recently set up Instagram for High Octane Dads and got
Uh,
that up and running.
yes, I did. We really haven't put a whole lot into it yet. Trying to figure out because there's so many advancements in like so many different softwares these days on figuring out how to get you on also. Because right now it's tied in
Yeah.
with all my mess, and it's hard doing it all from a phone. Uh, and
Oh yeah.
I've got the inferior iPhones, so I can't do all the other fancy
I'm gonna
stuff
get
that
you converted one
Android
day.
phones. And honestly, I'm not against either one, but it's at this point, it's very user friendly. So plus I'm not one that upgrades my phone very often, so I'm on like three or four phones back or more.
Yeah. I like to tinker, and so with the Android, I get to play around with it a lot. But
Yeah,
speaking of the different apps and things, I wanted one thing I wanted to mention that was very important, and a lot of users or viewers will drop off pretty early in the video, and I want to say this: um, comments, feedback are very important. Be sure hit the like button, the subscribe, and all of that. It really helps us out. Just those subscriptions on Spotify specifically, reviews. We love getting reviews back on Spotify, and that definitely helps us to grow and continue to get recommended and push us out there. So if you've listened to some episodes, you've got some feedback, hit us up on Spotify, give us some reviews, like and subscribe on YouTube, and follow our Facebook pages. That's where we post most everything,
right.
and then it kind of gets filtered out to everything else.
And we can see who's watching and who's not. And there's a lot of you that are not subscribed that are watching. So if you would subscribe, that would help us a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it's big for us. Like we hit 100 subscribers right now. While that's
Woo!
not for some of the big time guys a big deal, for us that was a huge deal.
Right.
It's been super. I think we're at 104 when I checked this
Yeah,
morning,
something
so
like that.
still growing.
Yeah.
We definitely don't want to fall short. I think the statistic is that a vast majority of the podcasts end before episode 20, and we're not going to be one of those. If nothing else, Chris and I are going to keep hanging out and talking,
Mhm.
and we're going to put it out there if you're listening or not. But we definitely appreciate everybody that's listening.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, and just some cross promotion. So I was on. I think I mentioned this last week, but I did a spot for the Untitled Car Project podcast, and I've talked with those guys some since we got together and chatted. And it was a lot of fun. B, those guys are great. They're true blue car guys. I saw a post today. By the time this goes out, it'll be a few days ago. The guy over there picked up a Stingray Corvette that he's going to start restoring. So
Oh, awesome.
super cool. Going to be following the progress of that. I don't know how active their YouTube has been in the past because they don't do much video for the podcast. Like we upload ours to YouTube and video first, and then we've kind of filtered everywhere else.
Right.
They're more on the
Which we've,
podcasting apps.
which with us, growing, we found that that's a pretty easy way to do it. And also with this
For
Riverside
sure.
app, that's one thing that I wanted to note that whatever we can do to make life easier for James, because he is the real MVP, knocking out all the editing and figuring out all the technical work. So, thank you. You do
Yeah,
great.
I enjoy it.
You're not paid enough. We need to make sure he's paid more.
Overworked and underpaid
Yeah.
for sure. No, I love doing it. The before we get rolling, on the meat of the episode, I do want to say I'm wearing my number one hat today. My boy Ross Chastain got his first win of the season. He's not in the playoffs for the NASCAR championship this year, but he did get a win in Kansas. I think they were racing this weekend, and it was a great race to watch. Come back right at the end, ended up winning the race. So super cool to see him get that win, and hopefully many more. But really been enjoying watching this season, and seeing him and the Trackhouse Racing team do what they're doing. Hopefully, I think Daniel Suarez, he got the win in Atlanta. I was at that race, and so that's his teammate with Trackhouse Racing, and so that was cool to see. And then Ross got his win last night. So going to be watching the playoffs closely, but I always like to see those guys get a win. I know you're not a big NASCAR guy, but it was
Yeah. Well, so that's what I want to get into that. So I'm a
yeah.
horrible car guy because I don't watch any racing. I don't follow any racing. I don't follow any sports. I don't know people's names. I'm horrible with names. Not saying that I don't dislike any of it. I just don't have I don't know if it's the attention span or brain capacity or whatever. I just can't. I feel like I'm always overextended anyway. But this goes back to even when I was a kid. I just can't watch and follow anything, professional sports, whatever. It bores the hell out of me. Um, but
So it interestingly enough, I thought about this the other day, and I was talking with somebody, and I can't remember who, and we were talking about baseball. And pro sports, like I can definitely watch. I can sit down and watch a football game. I enjoy it. I don't follow it. And like with baseball, like I do not get into the like, okay, I know the stats, the batting averages of all the
right,
players and who's doing what. I'm not gonna, I don't have the bandwidth to spend my free time doing that. But I will say that I enjoy sitting down and watching a football game. I enjoy um, watching my dogs play.
yeah,
The Braves, go Braves. They're in the wild card seat, or playing for the wild card spot for the playoffs this year, to go to the World Series again. So kind of been watching that, and the the thing that makes watching baseball or football or NASCAR interesting is when you really start to appreciate the depth and the strategy behind why they make the decisions that they do. So
hmm,
in a NASCAR race, right, like when they decide to pit, how many laps they're going to try to go, whether they come in on a caution and pit or not, and
it's all in
just
the strategy.
everything that goes into those decisions. Yeah, and when you think about it that way, and and then you really think about these guys are sitting in this car for several hours
Oh yeah,
sometimes, right? Like that alone makes it an impressive feat. And so when you watch it and you kind of think about those things in context, it makes it a lot more interesting to watch. Just like the strategy behind baseball, and what do you do when you got a runner on first and third? What does the batter do, and what pitches does the pitcher throw? And it's it makes it more enjoyable to watch.
right.
But with that said, I usually am going to have it on in the background while I'm doing something else.
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I don't know. I've tried. I mean, I grew up. My dad's really big into sports. He watches basketball, football, some baseball.
Oh, I can't watch basketball.
So honestly, out of any of them, I could watch basketball. So,
Basketball is incredibly fun to go to a game and watch,
right. Oh yeah.
but just watching it on TV, I don't know. I've just never gotten into it. Maybe it goes back to what I was talking about with baseball and NASCAR and everything else. I've just never given it a fair shake to sit down and watch it.
Yeah. To me, the football, the baseball is just not exciting enough for me. If I'm trying to watch it on television, any of them really, I'd much rather go and watch a live game. But
Oh yeah.
that's just a whole lot, and I don't have
But out
time
of
for
all
that
of that, man,
mess.
I'll tell you, a NASCAR race in person is insane.
Oh, I'm sure it
I
is.
I love it. I'm gonna find a way one day to get to Atlanta with my camera and not shoot from the stands, and
Yeah.
it's going to be
Awesome.
amazing
Yeah.
because I've shot from the stands. I did this last year, and it's a lot of fun. But like having now been to LS Fest and been able to get down trackside or in places where you can get really good angles and really good shots, like my goals have changed over the years as a photographer. First, it was to get into a magazine. Well, I've done that. Um, not a huge publication, but shout out to local car magazine. They're somewhere up near Atlanta. I shot some photos of the Southeastern Gassers racing and sent them some photos and ended up with like a 2 page, or I can't remember if it was 1 page or 2 page, but it was full pages of my photos. And I've got like 15 copies of that magazine, and I'll never get rid of them
That's
because
awesome.
just was super proud to say, okay, I've got them in a magazine, and so I've done that, and my goal now is to get trackside or somewhere close at a NASCAR race and be able to shoot. That's my
That would be awesome. Really awesome. And I think for me,
yeah,
like going to LS Fest, and honestly, I've never been to any other event similar. Most events that I do go to are either, one thing or another. It's like all autocross, all road racing, all drag racing.
yeah.
I don't know if it's the ADD, ADHD, or kicking in, but I love it because there's so much to do. And I'm like, okay, if I get bored of this, I'll just walk over here and check out what they got going on over here. And it's all
Yeah.
cars. And I'm not a big car show guy much anymore. I've always been one. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a racer, but I wouldn't say I'm a car show guy. I'm kind of in between. I like to go out and enjoy the vehicles, and I like to have a nice car, but I don't want to be afraid to drive it. I don't want to be afraid to race it. So, and if we want to go farther, we talked about a little bit about this, about a topic, how
Yep.
that translates into like what kind of car guy are you? Or if you're a car guy, like, you got people that are into, European cars, imports, domestic cars, or you want to break down the muscle cars, pony cars like Camaro Firebirds? Are you a more of like a road racer? Would you call them? Pro touring build cars, pro street, drag racer. I mean, or you're into sedans, wagons, off roading. I mean, there's so many different things, and also how that changes as you've grown. I mean, for me personally, I always wanted a Firebird. I wanted a Trans Am. So I always was really big into these two-door coupe cars, or sports cars, what you would call them. But I mean, as you've seen, the F body is a very versatile platform. I mean, they're used for a lot of different things and do well, like we've spoke about before on here.
Which is not great for an indecisive guy like myself who's like, all right, I'm going to make it into a cruiser. Well, it could be a
Yeah.
drag car. Well, I could go do autocross with it.
Oh yeah. So, like I said, for me, I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, there's been a lot of people that know me and still know me by having Camaro and Firebirds, and I sold my Camaro 2 years ago now, and I still have my Trans Am, and I'll always have it, but I really haven't been very active with it in the last several years. I mean, I don't drive it out very much. I haven't been to many meets or any races with it. A lot of it's due to just life and, me needing to get the car to a point where it's a lot more enjoyable for me to drive. I think a lot of it is I need to spend the time to really, work on that thing to make it where I need it. I guess not where I need it, but where it's comfortable, where I can enjoy it again. But
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I love them all. I mean, I always liked big cars for whatever reason, and I know some older guys were always like, "Oh yeah, all the four door Novas." Excuse me, whew, the four door Novas and Chevelles and all that. Oh, we scrapped all them. Those were parts cars. Shit, now I'll be like, man, I'd love to find one of those old cars, even in four door. I don't care. It may not be the typical hot rod, but like I tell you what, my four door Caprice, I love it. I mean, it's a great road trip car.
Yeah.
For a big, heavy car, it's a lot of fun. And I mean, you can feel the weight difference you go between the F body and the Caprice, but I mean, It drives nice. I can daily drive it. It runs mid 12s with fairly stock stuff in it. I mean, it's got a cam, but it's nothing radical. And but then I have my F body, which I love, but it's pretty impractical these days. And I've got
Yeah, well,
I love the trucks, so I'm a little bit of everything.
oh man.
But if I had to pick
Yeah.
one, like let's say one type of car build, like a pro street or like an all out drag car, whatever. I want to say that even when I was a kid, I leaned more towards like pro touring builds. So cars that could kind of do it all, but not what do we call it? Master of none, but knower of all.
Jack of all trades,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
master of none.
So I mean,
Well,
I like something that we can enjoy, kind of like what Kevin said the other week. He wants to be able to drive his car to the track, and that's kind of how I've always felt. In a lot of the cars that I've always idolized and looked at when I was younger were these pro touring builds that, yeah, I can go autocross it and send it down the track, but I'm going to drive it all over the hell too.
yeah. Well, I think for me that definitely has changed. When I was younger, I really just wanted a cool cruiser.
Yeah.
I never really had any aspirations of building a race car. And then as this thing has developed, which I've got some project updates for that, for this week. But as it's developed, having no heat, no air, it's definitely more maybe of a or was a purpose driven drag car for the most part, because I wasn't going to get out and drive it on a long trip without air, and definitely not with the wife. But I do enjoy getting out and cruising with it. And so when I was up at LS Fest, I met up with a guy and bought a set of WS6 wheels off of a fourth gen. They're powder coated black, and I'm not sure how I'm going to like the red with the silver ground effects and the black wheels. I think I'm going to like it, but it's going to have to be lowered a little bit. Still got to get the spacers, but I ordered the Nitto tires today for those wheels. So, and what I'm getting at is I've got the drag pack on the car, and that's all I really had other than the stock 15s that I've had set back for years. So now the plan is to get these 17 by 9 WS6 wheels outfitted with some decent sticky tires. And I went with the Nittos because like the car's probably still not going to see more than 5,000 miles a year or something like that. Like I'm not going to be driving it the way you drive the Caprice, but I want to get out and drive it a lot more. And when I do, I want to be able to get into a curve and not worry about those 4.5-inch wide wheels in the front, or if I get caught in some water or whatever, to know that it's going to be okay. So my goal for it has kind of become similar to the OBS. Like I want something cool, like you said, that I can go cruise in, and then if I do want to drive it to LS Fest, I can drive it there. And that's really
Yep.
my goal with the car really has become two things. One, to be something that I can drive a decent distance and not have to worry about. I'd like to be able to go to the F Body Beach Bash one year.
I want to do
And
that too.
two, that it's serviceable.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we got to do that. But it's got to be serviceable. But like as I was doing, the intake and stuff on it now. So, I mentioned update. I've managed to pick up a fast 102 intake to go with the Motion Raceworks throttle body. I got that buttoned up today and fired the car up for the first time. But, as I'm taking things apart and putting stuff back together, it's like I could just slap it back together the way it was. But if I can find a way to make it a little more serviceable, a little bit easier to do this next time, I'm always trying to do that as I go. So,
So
but
that's
yeah,
a
my,
big
my
thing that
goal is
I've
just
done with all
really
mine. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I mean,
No,
I was
no,
just saying,
yeah.
that's really been a big focus of mine, is just make it enjoyable. If it's a pain in the butt to take apart, I'm not going to want to work on it, and then it's going to sit.
And honestly, that's the big thing with when I swapped my Trans Am, and like every exhaust system I build on anything anymore, I try to make everything as serviceable as possible. So like the exhaust system on my Suburban, it's got V-bands everywhere. Everything pops apart, so I can pull all the pipes out of the way. You can get to everything on the frame. Nothing's in the way. Same thing on the Trans Am. I put V-bands on the Y pipe. I can drop the whole Y pipe and the whole center of the exhaust is out of the way in like 3 minutes. It's great.
Yeah,
And
that
my
that
Caprice,
is a goal of
I
mine
did the
because
same
mine is a
thing.
pain.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen pictures.
Man,
It's not hard.
don't get me
It's
started
so
on that.
easy. So my C10 that I had, I did the same thing. I cut the collectors off the headers, and I welded 3-inch V bands onto it, and I built a 3-inch mandrel bend exhaust that went through the frame and up and tucked in between the frame, and it was just makes life so much easier. You don't have to deal with
Well, I think I told you the guy that did my exhaust when I got the car done because I was so excited to just get it on the road. I took it to the first guy that could like get it in the door, and he didn't charge me a whole lot, but the headers, I've got the Speed Engineering long tubes, and he ended up welding a bit onto, I think it's the passenger header to make it clear, right? And when he we ended up doing it, like the header is now this much longer than it was. So because where the flange was going to sit, it was going to like hit the frame, and he put like the standard just 3-bolt flanges, and so I ended up with this extra long tube header. And so like to get it out of the car, like if I had to pull the header, it's like, drop the transmission cross member, lean everything down just so I can snake the thing. And it's still a pain to snake it out of there. So it's got to be reworked, and there's got to be a better way.
we
Me
have the
just now
technology.
getting my welding stuff set up. Yeah. Just now getting everything set up. Like I've got to redo it. But I've just wanted to wait until I could do it myself.
Well,
So,
so you have the Speed Engineering headers on that car, right? So when I did mine, I know because I had a Racing Innovation. Well, when I first swapped my car, I had F body manifolds.
no, I'm sorry. It's the Racing Innovation ones. It just hit me when you said that. They're the Racing Innovation
Okay,
long tubes.
so they hang pretty low.
Yep.
All right, so
Yep.
I had V bands on the ones that I had, but the passenger side on my car was really close to the frame, and I ended up having to pie cut the collector and then turn it towards the center of the car because it was hitting the frame rail. It looked horrible, but it worked.
See, that's
And
how this is. But instead of doing that and turning it any, he just welded a piece of tubing on it and then
yeah,
flattened it. But the thing is, it's still, that was one of the things I was kind of worried about pulling the knock sensors when I did the ICT valley cover when I put this intake on. But the truth is, I had the knock sensors like desensitized. I don't know what the right word would be because I was getting a lot of false knock from the header
yep.
riding on the frame and tapping it, and so they were basically useless because they were getting false readings all the time anyway.
Yeah. So I think that's what I had going on last year with my Caprice. And I would have issues, and I still have issues. And we talked about it, a couple episodes back about my exhaust system sliding rearwards. After, a couple thousand miles, few thousand miles, the exhaust will slowly shift backwards and the mufflers will vibrate against the rear hangers at certain RPMs. And it just puts off a bad
Right.
resonance through the car. Eventually,
Yeah.
I need to put V bands on my exhaust, and it'll help that. But I know Joe commented on, I think our YouTube video and said that he run, I guess self tappers through the through the slip fit on his Camaro, and then once you do that, it just kind of locks it all together. Which I could do that. I don't know. I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just like me. I get into, I want to have that mindset of don't get it right, just get it running.
Yeah,
And then I get into it and I'm like, well, I kind of maybe like I want to do it just right. And that's, you saw that and I made a quick video about this earlier, but the brackets that came with the Summit fuel rails, they're because it's just like the Chinese
yeah,
billet, aluminum fuel rails. The brackets are, I mean, I don't even know how anybody thought this was good. They're literally just a little piece of metal with like a bend at the end and some holes in it that, at least with the Fast 102, they don't line up with anything at all. So yeah, as I was working on those brackets for the Fast 102 intake with the Summit fuel rails, like they weren't going to line up with anything at all on that intake. There was, they didn't line up with any of the holes for the factory fuel rail mounts, or I had thought, well, maybe I can just maybe they'll line up with the holes that bolt it down to the head, and I can do that. Or there's some other holes on the Fast 102, and I was like, well, I can put some inserts in the bottom and bolt them down that way. They didn't line up with anything, so I templated a bracket and cut one out of just some metal that I've had. I mentioned that last week. But then I was able to get with my brother-in-law and actually get four, cut on the bandsaw with some aluminum. And I'll post some pictures of them, but they turned out phenomenal, except that I didn't think about the washers on the bolts. So I had to like feed the washer underneath the bracket and drop the bolt through. And one of these days I'll pull them back off and just grind the edges off if I decide I want to, but it's not that big a deal. And they're working. So everything's bolted in now, and those brackets look great. But that's where like I could have figured out something else just to get it going, but like I wanted that little thing that was going to make it really, really nice. And again, it's like why have such a nice intake and some stupid looking brackets on it?
So for me, I've always been kind of that, don't necessarily get it right, just get it running. And it was really not meant to be that mentality. It's usually I get into something, I'm like, okay, I'm tired of this. I don't want to fucking do it anymore. So I'm either going to walk away from it right now, or we're just going to hurry up and get it done, make it work. And how we were talking about, you were worried about, you saw a little bit of condensation out of your exhaust. And I was like, yeah, well, when I first put the T56 in my car, it was a used clutch, used flywheel, and I did buy a new slave cylinder. And, used T56. I slapped it all in the car. I left my house and I drove, I don't know, a mile or two up the road. And I was like, okay, I drove to this little, convenience store and just turned around, felt everything out. I'm like, cool, $6,000 clutch dump. and then like no lift shifting through third gear. And I'm like, this is badass. And then I got home and I knocked a ground wire loose and like everything on my dash quit working. And I'm like, fuck, I broke it. But then I'm like, but it drives nice.
Yeah. Well, and I kind of got that way even with this intake, right? Because every time I turned around, it's like, okay, I need those brackets. And, even before that, I was like, maybe the LS6 fuel rail will work. So I kept, it was one more thing I needed. And I was ready to get it done, but I swear every time I've gotten to a point where I'm like, screw this, I just want it done. I'm going to thrash through and just make it happen so I can go drive it. Every single time I overlook something small, and it's like, you idiot, you should have saw that.
Right.
And so I was a little worried even with this, like I told you when I cranked it up, that like, man, what if one of those, screws that hold the runners down in there wasn't tightened fully or something, and I'm usually pretty particular as I'm going through making sure I tighten everything down, but it was like, what if I missed that one thing? And I did miss a little something in the video I sent you. It sounded like it was sucking air, like a vacuum leak.
Right.
And the little cheap oil cap breather thing that I'd bought that goes on the passenger side valve cover, the breather part had just fell off, so it was just a big open hole. In top of the oil cap. So I found that, and I remember exactly when it fell off, and I was like, I'll pick that up in a little bit. Yeah. And it sat there for 3 days. So, but yeah, it's together and running. But like I said, every time I get into that mentality, like I just want to get it done, I miss something, and sometimes it's something important. So when I get to that point, I try to walk away and come back the next day.
So I will say that I did a lot of that with my Trans Am when I did the swap years ago. A lot of it was trying to do it cheap. And, really I was, there was people that had done it, and there were some write-ups. There was a lot of write-ups on, TGO, a lot of the forums. Really, I will say that if you can swap an engine into a car, even if it's the same engine that belonged in that car, you can do like an LS swap. They're pretty idiot-proof these days.
Oh, for sure.
But back
with
then,
all the support that's out there now, it's definitely
insane.
doable, especially if you've got the money to buy the right stuff.
Oh yeah. But with mine, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that I did that works. And like I said, I started the swap in like 09, 2010, and it's been up relatively that whole time. I mean, at least where I can run it. but there was a lot of things along the way that I did very cheap, very quickly, that I want to redo. A lot of it's like, one, the aesthetics are either not great, or two, I'm at a point where it's like, that might not be the best way I should have done that. Or, in the car, I've driven it in the rain in some nasty weather and all since it's been swapped. But at this point, it's been several years back.
Yeah.
So the car is not like it's driven in all the weather conditions. So there are things on the car, like under the car, and maybe some stuff with the wiring and whatnot that are not best to be in lots of weather.
I mean, what are the other weather conditions other than sunny and rainy? Like, we don't have anything else here.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean just like in the rain, especially, just a lot of shit getting wet.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's nothing like bare wires or anything like hanging out, but there's stuff that I'm just like, okay, I'm not trying to make a show car, but I want to make things that are where everything looks like it has a place, where everything is serviceable, where it's not going to just get screwed up from if I want to go cruise it and daily drive it or whatever for several weeks. That if I can run in any type of weather. But there's things now that like I did, or like when I put the new headers on it last year. So I had Racing Innovation. I swapped Speed Engineering. When I finally did them, I found out that I had a motor mount bolt loose. Like the main bolt was loose. Like the nut was
No,
gone
the
off
one that
the end
goes
of it.
through it.
Yeah, the nut was gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the only thing holding the bolt in was the back of the alternator. It had walked out, and the back of the alternator was just holding it in place.
Wow.
And it had been like that for several
Yep.
years, and I didn't know. So it's good to,
Right.
especially old builds, is to go back through them and double check some things. But like I said, I'm that guy that if something's going to break, I'm going to find out right away what it is, right after getting it back together, because I'm pissed off. I'm tired of working on it. I just want to have fun. I just want to do burnouts. That's really all I want to do is do
See,
burnouts.
I want to be that guy. I get out and I'm like, all right, I know the idiot that built this thing, so I'm gonna baby it for a little while. That's just how I end up being. And, like
And you're
with
not wrong.
my
You're
like
not wrong
long
at all.
trips. Yeah, I mean, and so like long trips, like I would love to drive at LS Fest, even without the air. Like John, the guy I got the intake from, he's got a little. It's a Toyota mini truck. I'll post some pictures of it too in this video because I went out to Central Georgia Car Scene race a couple weeks ago, and he was racing the truck and got some cool little pictures of it. That thing is amazing, little turbo. I think it's turbo 6.0. John, if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure it's a 6.0. Might be a little 5.3, I don't know, but he was rolling, and he drove it all the way to LS Fest, so he was up there when we were there, and I followed right behind him, and he drives all the way there, and I was like, man, it's the only real, like I don't know if I want to drive it to Kentucky without air conditioning. He was like, shut up. I'm trying to have air conditioning, and he's got a little fan clipped on the sun visor, and then he had his like one of those little, not the big like icy breezes, but it was like a little cooler with a little fan on top of it, and he was like, I'll just turn that on and sit it in the passenger seat. And he's like, I got some air conditioning. So,
Heck
like,
yeah.
it's like, stop making excuses, And so maybe I'll drive it one year, especially now that I won't have just the like wide rear and skinnies up front. So
Right.
I'm
Well,
pretty excited about that. But anyway, the big thing that I was worried about with driving at long distances is, the factory LG4, right? It was a quadrajet car. So the fuel line comes up the driver's side right
oh
along the
yeah,
frame
yeah.
rail, goes over the transmission tunnel, and then comes up, to the engine bay. Well, I'm still using that hard line. So I've got the Corvette filter, and then I've got AN compression fittings on there, and dash 6 AN line going to the hard line with another compression fitting. Then the hard line comes up all the way over, and then I have compression fittings under the hood that do dash 6 AN to the fuel rail. And again, that was kind of one of those, like, I just want the car running, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time figuring this out. I know this will work, and I did it. But now, where that hard line comes up along the frame rail there, I mean, maybe an eighth of an inch from the header, right?
Yeah.
And I heat wrapped it with some, I've got some of that with the DEI, like,
Yeah.
Velcro heat wrap. And I'm sure that helps. but eventually it's still got a heat soak in my mind. I would think,
So
driving 6, 7 hours.
my suggestion, you're not gonna like it, or you might, I don't know, is put speed engineering headers on it. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, that's one of those,
I
like,
had the racing innovation for many years, and for the money, they are a good header. Uh, they are a true 1 3/4. I remember when I first got mine many years ago. There was questions about it. Are they true 1 3? They are. I've got plenty of pictures that I took several years ago. With a set of calipers, but they just the fitment is okay. But on my car, there was a couple places, like I said, on the passenger side that was touching, and then on the driver's side it was stupid close to the fuel line, like you're saying. And my car's got a stick shift, so the hydraulics run right through there, and I kept having issues with it boiling the brake fluid, and so I
mm,
ended up doing all sorts of shit and like wrapping the line and trying to zip tie it out of the way, running different brake fluid, and I've since put the speed engineering on, and it clears everything. And
yeah,
I welded V bands to them, and they clear everything. The only difference was
yeah,
I had to slightly jack the motor up to get everything in, but I mean, once it's in there, everything clears. And I've owned 3 different sets of speed engineering headers currently, and they're great. I haven't had to beat on any
yeah.
of them. They all fit great.
Well, and when I go to redo the exhaust, I'm not above just getting a replacement header because fitment wise, I mean the Racing Innovation, like, they got me up and running. I
Oh,
got those, I
absolutely.
think, through Matt, and they weren't very expensive because at the time I was on a super budget.
Yep.
So been very happy with them, and I mean they've been on the car for several years now,
Hmm.
and they've done fine. Other than that issue, I will say in the interim, I've already started to. My plan really is coming off of the Corvette filter because mine I did it underneath it's bolted under the car, right underneath the rear,
Yeah, yeah.
the driver's side back seat.
Hmm.
So it's not super far from the tank,
Hmm.
and then just the feed line is the only thing going because I didn't have to
Yeah,
make a really long return, right?
yeah.
So
You did like the
I
F, like
really
kind of like
think,
how the fourth gen F bodies are.
yeah, and so my plan really from there is just to, I've got all the hose and fittings up on my shelf up here. The plan is just to take the Dash Six line that I have and put the press in fittings on it, and just right where the filter is, go into the frame rail
Right.
and run up to the front. And I've already got a hole drilled on the driver's side where I can bring it just up and out, right there in the engine bay, and that should keep it, pretty well air gapped from the headers. And obviously I don't have to worry about the
Clutch line.
manual transmission stuff, the hydraulics and stuff. But I do want to upgrade the brakes. That's another thing that I'm really looking at this winter is as I've added more and more power. I was telling my wife the other day, I'm like, these are stock 86 style
Yeah.
piston calipers and rotors, and it's like this thing's making at least double
Oh
the
yeah.
power that it was making in 1986, and I got to be able to stop it, and can't quite swing the TBM brakes. I am keeping an eye. Motion's supposed to release those the new brake line they've got. They're working on the different, you know, for different things, and Doug's always been really good about coming out with parts for the third gen, so I can only assume it's coming. And so maybe those will be where I go with it, but obviously a worthwhile investment to be able to stop.
Oh yeah,
So
and after LS Fest, that was a big thing that I saw with my Caprice. It definitely needs better brakes. Thankfully, those cars, factory Brembos off of like an SS, a Camaro SS, you know,
I was reading about that.
there's a lot of stuff that it takes very little work to bolt them right on. Unlike, our F bodies, they don't have a hub. You have to, buy hubs or have some rotors machined down to make hubs in order to put a hat style
Mm-hmm.
rotor on. And then you got to get all the brackets, which it's great that people have figured it all out and you can do a decent brake swap relatively inexpensively. But
Yeah.
it's now I'm getting kind of spoiled with some of these newer cars where they make so many things that just kind of swap around. So
Interchange. Yep.
yeah, which I mean, I guess really, in hindsight, the older cars were built very similar, but the technology now, I like putting the new technology on old cars.
Yeah, that you were talking about what kind of car guy, right? And I don't know that I
Yeah.
ever answered that other than that I liked having a cruiser, but that has been my dream from the start was really when you see those older cars that have a lot of the newer
Yeah.
amenities and things. They handle like a newer car. They
Hmm.
stop like a newer car. Even down to like Josh's radio and stuff with the Android Auto, that the OBS is for sure getting one of those. I don't know about the Firebird yet, but like having all of that kind of stuff in these older cars to me is like I love it.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's a big part of why. I mean, I guess we're soft, maybe. I don't know. Like, Freiburger fan gonna be like, "Oh, we're out there, dying in this garbage." But if I was maybe with somebody and I could have somebody to bitch at the whole time while I'm miserable, I would probably enjoy it. I mean, as funny as that sounds,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've really enjoyed the whole driving experience. Driving. I like a lot of windshield time, I guess. And that's one thing I've always told my wife was that I'd love to do like a cross country trip. Given we have
Yeah.
several kids, so that makes things difficult, but I'd love to do a cross country trip in a cool car. Not just,
Yeah.
oh, we're hauling a camper or we're riding around in my Suburban. I want to do something in like my Caprice or my Bird. Do like a cross country trip and you visit a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
Sort of like a drive and drag, but a drive, not necessarily power tour. But I mean, I'm not saying nothing, not
Well, I
knocking.
was about to say you're almost describing the power tour, other than if you're going to throw some racing in there, maybe. But
Yeah,
I mean that's
and that's not something. I mean, I'm not against it. I've always been very interested in those too. But I really like the whole drive and drag setups that are popular right now because, like
yeah.
Kevin said, and like Matt and them, it's just I like to be able to cruise and drive and enjoy the cars, but I want to race them. So not necessarily always be super competitive. I just like cars. I like beating on them. I like having a good time, and then I like being able to just cruise, listening to the music. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what you would call that, but I mean, that's kind of what I like to do.
I think that's in my mind a genuine car guy, right? Like if you're somebody who's into a very specific type of cars, that's cool. But if you think that's the only way to do cars right,
Oh yeah.
if you're like a Fox body Mustang guy, and there is no car greater than the Fox body Mustang that has ever been made, and that's the only thing you're going to build, and you can't appreciate anything else. Or on the flip side of that, if you think that the IROC was the pinnacle of automotive engineering, and there's nothing that'll ever be better, and those Ford guys are just stupid because they wanted to build one of those, like you don't get it.
Oh yeah.
To me, if you're somebody who can say, "Hey, that's not my cup of tea, but I get why you like it.
Right.
I get it." Unless you like Cybertrucks, and then I don't
So
understand you. But
and I'll say I've had when I was for a short period of time when I was in high school, I owned a '96 Honda Civic Coupe. It was a single slammer, non VTEC, automatic, base model car with roll up windows, crank windows, and I hated it. And for me, it was that whole stigma of, oh, I had a muscle car or pony car or whatever. Now I got to drive this Honda, you know. But
mm-hmm.
now looking back, I'm like, man, I had so much fun in cheap, dumb cars. And I used to
Yep.
blast that thing down back roads and not care because it didn't make a ton of power. And I mean, I remember doing like on closed courses in Mexico. I would do like, uh,
Obviously.
oh yeah, I would do the reverse 180s a lot. I remember like ripping the emergency brake and sliding around turns, and I mean, it was just a dumb car. And literally, I was really bad to it and blew it up. It only had like 60,000
Not
miles on
you.
it. It only had like 60,000 miles on it. and it
Damn,
had,
Chris.
yeah, it had rubber along the A pillars going up from doing burnouts, and you could feel the rubber stuck to the side of the car and like all along the roof. And I remember going out in the parking lots. People were like, "Are they gonna do a burnout?" I'm like, "No." And then I'm like, I go to leave. I'm like, "Watch this," and I'd back up down I'd put it in reverse, and you hear it going as I'm backing up, and I'd slam it in the drive and rip the e-brake, and it'd just be like just banging the limiter, and I'd have smoke rolling inside the car coming out the vents. Oh, sorry, mom.
No, see, I mean, I didn't do a lot of that, but that's like I tell people, all the time that my RSX is the only car I sold that I ever missed. And like I sold the '01 Bullet Mustang, and I mean, it was a cool car and I enjoyed it. It had nice exhaust on it. Dad loved the way that car sounded with the Bassani
Oh
X
yeah.
pipe, and I had Mac flow paths on it. There's actually a video of that on my YouTube channel from back in the day when I worked at Circuit City. But my RSX, it's the only car that I remember. Like I would leave, be 8, 9 o'clock. I didn't have anything going on, and I would just go cruise. And I mean, I'd drive till midnight or later. Just driving around and there's something about the handling of that car and just I lowered it. I lowered it and put exhaust on it. That's all I did to
Yep.
it. Very tastefully done. It was a Pearl White Type S, and I don't know. I have a lot of fond memories of just cruising around in that car, and
Yep.
and that's really, and I traded it for the Mustang because like you said, I kind of got in my head like, it's a little 4 cylinder. I'm gonna get back into a V8, and in my mind too, it was like, this was the Bullet was a numbered car, so when will I have the chance to own another one of these potentially? So just happened to come across it at a dealer one night and was like, all right, let's see if we can make a deal on it. But at the end of the day, I just have a lot of fond memories just cruising around town in that car and like going to the bowling alley or whatever. And I
Yep.
think maybe that's what I miss more than the car itself. But it was a great little car.
Oh yeah.
I actually Googled LS swapping an RSX just to see if anybody had done it. There was a guy working on it, but I don't know if anybody knows of one. Like commented, I'd love to see it, but I don't know that it made enough sense to do
So
versus like doing a Nissan or something. But
I'll tell you this: I can't own a front wheel drive car because they're so easy to spin the tires, and I will just blaze the tires everywhere I go. And I'm that kind of
yeah,
guy. And so my wife has this 2014 Hyundai Santa Fe. It's all-wheel drive. It's got like a 3.3 V6. I don't know. I think they're supposed to blow up a lot, but whatever. Um, she told me right before LS Fest, she's like, "Man, I think the transmission's going out. Da 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 da. It's making this weird.
hmm,
It's feeling funny." I'm like, "Whatever." And she said, "It feels like I hit something every now and then." I'm like, "What?" Like when she's backing up. So I drove it one day and we were all going somewhere and we came home and I was backing in the driveway and I kind of, so what the hell is that? And she's like, "That's what I was telling you." I'm like, "Whatever." So I ended up
you
for
should have
those.
listened to your wife, Chris.
Yeah, well, so those I did a trans fluid swap. So those you don't like drop a pan, change a filter. They have I believe it's a non-serviceable filter. I know the Volvo is. So all you do is you do a drain and fill. So I did a drain and fill on it, and but right before I did that, we were driving it home. Well, me and the kids were driving it home. We came off this road, and I just pulled up to a stop sign. Was looking, I turned right, come out, and it was just like it kind of shuddered for a second. You heard bing, bing, boom, and I'm like, "Uh-oh, something broke." And as soon as I heard it and felt it, I'm like, the rear diff broke. That's what she was feeling. There was probably a broken spider gear or something rolling around in there, and it was catching every now and then when she'd back up. Um,
Yeah.
I can honestly say, well, she told me when I come back from LS Fest, she's like, the car drives fine. It just feels loose. I'm like, what do you mean it feels loose? She's just something feels loose. She's not making that noise anymore. I'm like, probably what it is it's a front wheel drive car now, and you've always known it as an all wheel drive car, so you feel a little bit of the binding through the chassis or whatever through the car. So I
Hmm.
drove it one day, and there's a gravel road back behind our house, and I was like, all right, we're gonna go down this road. turned traction control off and stability control, and I slowed down and stopped on the gravel road and floored it. It's just front wheel drive, and apparently it's got a limited slip differential in the front of it too, because it will do both tires every time. Um, and then I did find out after getting off the gravel road. I mean, not trying to break anything, but I may have hammered it a couple times on asphalt, and it will just blaze both front tires for probably about 100 feet. And I'm like, this is stupid. I was like, this car is useless. Why do you want this in front wheel drive? Why do they sell these in front wheel drive? This is dumb because you're just going to break stuff. Or, so I won't.
Yeah.
Now I've driven the car a few times. We still haven't picked up a diff for it. It's not making any noise. I'm not worried about it. But I definitely want to
If it
get.
ain't broke, don't fix it. Although it is broke, but
I
it's
definitely want
working.
to. Oh yeah, I definitely want to fix it
Aren't we all?
before we get bad weather. Yeah, absolutely. I want to fix it before bad weather because she's more comfortable driving that in ice and snow than my Suburban, just because the Suburban's so big. Um, but I mean, it works. The few times I've tried to drive it in the rain, like I'll pull out of my neighborhood and it just starts spinning. I'm like, all right, this is going to get somebody hurt because you go to take off, and if it's wet at all, it just spins. And I'm like, this is kind of
Hmm.
stupid. Man, she's like, well, I don't have that problem. Maybe it's just you. I'm like, maybe it is. But I mean, she's like, well, it's done it to me a few times. I'm like, see, so it's not just me. But no, any front wheel drive car I've ever messed with, it's like I'm always like, all right, let's see if we can make it spin tires today. And now I do that with rear wheel drive cars too, just to be fair. But I just you figure you get the way the weight shifts, it just shifts to the back, pulls all the weight off the front wheels, and just plays them. So that's why I
Yeah.
don't think you ever really paid attention to like a lot of the Hondas and front wheel drive cars at the drag strip. They look like they're rolling around on completely flat slicks. The actual fast one, but usually they're the
Yeah.
ones that show up and just oil it down every time because they're breaking axles and breaking transmissions and you know.
Yeah.
And I mean the Hondas were a bane to the existence of at our local drag strip. And I mean, not saying anything bad. They can't make power. They can't be fast. But they always tend to break. I mean,
Right.
it's it's just how it is. But no, I couldn't have an
Yep.
front wheel drive car. Wrong wheel drive just doesn't do it for me. Um, I'll need front tires all the time. Um, it's just not my thing. But they still break just like everything else. And I've broken front wheel drive, all wheel drive, rear wheel drive.
Yep. So you're saying you break stuff?
Yeah, sometimes it's just one of those days.
Yep. I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of bad weather, I had made a post about, the day that we recorded with Kevin. That was the night that Hurricane Helene was supposed to come through. We were very fortunate because we had, when it made landfall, it shifted to the right and literally missed us by one county. So we went from being on the dirty side of the storm on the east of it to the west side.
Okay.
So we, as like me and my family here, we got very lucky. But the storm has been devastating. I've got friends in South Georgia who I've been trying to check in on them. Like, hey, do you need anything? Water, fuel? It's about a 3 hour drive, but I'm like, I was off work yesterday to go to a doctor's appointment, and I was like, I've got the whole afternoon free. Like, what do you need? I'll bring it down. And I've seen Garrett Cleves McFarland was doing helicopter deliveries of supplies in, I think, North Carolina, and they coordinated with a whole bunch of other private helicopter pilots because they couldn't get a lot of the big military helicopters in to where some of these people were, and we're taking things like I never thought about like diapers. Like, you're gonna have a hard time getting diapers in a situation like that,
Yeah,
right?
I,
And
was,
um,
I didn't think about that either, honestly.
yeah, and so like I know they're doing, I think it's this weekend, a huge supply drop off. I want to say NASCAR is coordinating it, but I'm not positive. But it's at the racetrack in Charlotte, they're doing, you can bring supplies and then they're going to disseminate them out. So if you don't have a way to get something directly to people, but you want to help in some way, I know
Right.
that's going to be a big one. So I'll post some information about that if I can go back and find it, then I'm sure I'll be able to. But there's a lot of different organizations that are trying to do things to help with this relief because it's crazy. I mean, there's still a lot of flooding out there, and like I said, while we got lucky, there were a lot that didn't,
Yeah.
and
I mean, even
it's
where
crazy. I
I'm
know.
at, we've had quite a bit of flooding in areas. I mean, there's still quite a few people that are. I mean, people in some areas that were without the power for multiple days, week. Um,
Yeah.
People that are still flooded in. One guy that I work with, he listens. Where he lives is off of a back road right at the bottom of the mountain, and he's got two entrances in, but one of them's a power line road, and one of them's got like a small bridge, and it's supposed to be the mountain
Mm.
creek that goes to it. Well, he had like 3 feet of water over his bridge, so he's been stuck.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
Yeah. It's
things.
crazy, and places like Asheville, right? Like
Oh
when
yeah,
you live in, say, Raleigh, or you live in places that are near the coast, you kind of expect some, some of this type of weather and that type of flooding. And a lot of the homes are built with that in mind. Same thing like in Florida, right? Like folks that I know in Florida, I'm not saying Florida wasn't hit hard, but they sort of get that warning. It's like, hey, you need to evacuate. This is going to be really bad. Like when you live as far inland as somewhere like Asheville, North Carolina, like, you don't think it's going to get the way that it is now with the levels of flooding that they had. It's not going to say you're never going to have, any type of flash flooding or things like that, but it's just crazy. What has happened. I actually seen a picture of a map where it's like a power map showing lights on and everything, and it's crazy because it's like there's still a huge section that's just dark,
yep,
and so. Suffice to say, because my camera's about to die here, and we don't have to be on this because I know everybody's seen the coverage on it. But if you have an opportunity to help, there's something that you can do to help somebody if you're in those areas, or even if you're not. I know Garrett was running a GoFundMe for supplies and things as well. So if you're obviously somewhere farther away, but you want to help in some way, there are definitely options out there. So I would encourage you to do that. And yeah, unless you have anything else to say about that, I just wanted to mention it.
oh no, that's a great point. I mean, definitely. I know Justin that lives down up towards me. Well, he's about an hour from me. He's in our group chat. He put up a thing
Yep.
that's asking
So
about
he was.
people. He was going to do some runs down that way too. So
Yeah,
that's
which
great.
is awesome, and that's why I say, like, if you, if you have an opportunity, I know Valdosta, they're the ones about three hours from me. Douglas, Georgia, they've all been hit pretty hard as well, and just again, I'm always looking for ways to help. Matter of fact, I think we're going down towards Savannah this weekend. My daughter's got a band competition, and we'll be going down that way, and probably
Cool.
use the opportunity to take some things down if there's any relief efforts down that way.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's crazy, man. And luckily, this storm that's following it up and coming up the Gulf, they said, is not going to develop like Helene did. So
Good.
at least we're not going to get a 1-2 punch.
Yeah. Well, I think
But I
that.
do want to mention.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead because.
Now, I do want to mention on a lighter note, I do have my shirt from Oregon Motorsports on. This looked so much easier from the stands. A lot of
Yeah.
times we see what a lot of these guys are doing, and we talked about people in the pits and stuff at Ellis Fest, but man, it's work to get out there and do what these guys are doing.
Oh,
At some point, it's like, is this fun anymore?
Yep.
I thought we were supposed to be having fun.
Yeah. It is. If you like burning money
Yeah, for sure.
and
Yeah,
stress,
yeah,
heartburn.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well,
I think it's
again, just one. Oh, go ahead.
I think that's a pretty good place for us. I think we got quite a bit recorded.
Yeah, we're a little over an hour right now. I commend those guys, the Untitled Car Project podcast. I think theirs are like over 2 hours usually when
Yeah.
they post them.
The
And
one with you
I
in it
know
is
you
like
and I
three
could
hours.
absolutely sit here and Yeah, you and I could absolutely sit here and talk for that long, but like, it just being the two of us. Like, is anybody going to want to listen to something that long from just us? But I love like the way they've got a crew of guys. I think they're planning to go out to SEMA, which is super cool.
That would be cool.
I would definitely like to do that one year. But
Oh
you
yeah,
know, again, go and look those guys up on Spotify. Listen to them. Got a lot of great chemistry. They definitely know their stuff. I think one of them was a drift driver. I don't think you call him a drifter. That sounds bad, but and then they're in a lot of different things, but they're all just genuine car guys. It was a lot of fun hanging out with them.
yeah.
So go check them out. Give them a follow on Spotify. It literally costs nothing to hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, go ahead and pull ours up and hit subscribe too. We would definitely appreciate it. But as important as that is the reviews and comments and
Yes.
feedback, we really appreciate it because we want to keep doing this and we want to make this the best that it can be. So.
Oh yeah. And what kind of car guy are you? Or what kind of car guy do you think you are? What kind of car guy or girl do you aspire to be? Let us know. I mean, we like to hear all that. Show us your project. Show us what you got.
Yep. I want to be like Chris when I grow up.
Oh God, you
Have
don't want
running
to do that.
projects.
You don't want to do that. Hey, all of mine run.
Exactly.
But yeah. Well, hopes and dreams.
Hopes and dreams, man. But yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Go like, subscribe, hit the bell, as they say,
Yeah.
and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah. See y'all later.
All right. Have a good evening, folks.